Hello, this is Dr. Jeff Craig, Superintendent of West Aurora Schools, and welcome to episode 25. Today's guest has spent his entire 15-year career in School District 129, serving as a special education teacher, dean of students at the high school, assistant principal at Herget Middle School, and is currently our principal at Washington Middle School, Mr. Tom Davidson. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Craig. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Definitely excited.
Good to be able to kind of introduce you at a broader level or just dig a little deeper beyond just your role as a principal. So these are fun to do.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think we'll get into this, but Aurora's a big little town, you know, and I am from a very small town back in Ohio, and coming out here, you don't really know how many people know each other and the widespread, you know, of who's related and who's not. So it's been very interesting, you know, the last 15 years of just living out here in Aurora and getting to know other people. So I'm excited for it.
I think that's a common lament or a source of pride in Aurora area, that's for sure. So I think, as Anna was sharing earlier, this is our week. We celebrate the recognized week of Principal Appreciation Week, and certainly want to genuinely, to all of our leaders across our district, but specifically to you today, grateful and appreciate all the work that you do and your leadership at Washington Middle School now. As you have found, it's not an easy path, but certainly has a lot of value for our community. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. And you know, you've said it best. We do have a lot of great leaders and great principals in the district that it's easy to follow their lead. So I've been lucky enough to have a few mentors and, you know, people I can kind of model after as well. So it's a great group of people, a very diverse group of people too, with some different, you know, ideas and the ways they do things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's probably one of our proud takeaways from this district, is because of all those pieces. That's for sure. Yeah. So I think a lot of our folks that listen in to our podcast, a lot of them, you know, people kind of know that who's coming up, and we promote that out there. But I think there's a kind of a path, an internal path. You talk about the biggest little town. You know, we're second largest city in the state of Illinois behind Chicago, and yet we're very Peyton Place or Mayberry-ish. And so I think there's a path of born here, raised here, educated here, matriculated through our school system. And to our credit, many of our folks that graduate come back and are employees here. But I think you have a little different journey to talk about, and want to probe through that a little bit. But if you could talk to us about where you came from, how you got here, choices, decisions, and then bring us to current day.
Yeah, so where I came from, people ask me all the time, hey, where are you from? And I say Geneva, and they automatically think about 15 minutes north of here. And, you know, I'm from Geneva, Ohio, small little town right on Lake Erie, the northeast corner of Ohio.
So does that make you Ohio State fan?
I may be a pretty big Ohio State fan. You know, I get a lot of, gruff from the guys out here of LeBron James and Ohio State and all that. But yes, I am a huge Ohio State fan. Still a huge LeBron James fan. You know, when it comes to pro sports, they haven't really been all that great in Ohio, so you just kind of cheer for a win. But yeah, from small town Geneva, Ohio, when I first got out here, I kind of laughed where the high school had, you know, 3,600 kids, and I think my whole high school had maybe 1,000, so not very diverse, very small townish. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew my parents. Played football there, played basketball. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to go play college football at Edinboro University, and kind of a weird circle all the way back to Illinois. He was the head coach at Illinois for a while, and then he became the head coach at Edinboro, Lou Tepper, and you know, I got to have some guidance from him. At Edinboro is where I became friends with Nate Eimer, who's our head football coach.
Absolutely.
And, you know, state basketball champion here at West Aurora, and he always talked about West Aurora like it was the greatest place on earth. And, you know, in college, guys always joked about their hometown and, you know, always talked about their hometown and how great it was. And there was something about, he would always talk about West, in West Aurora in particular, of just how great it was and how he was going to go back and how, you know, he was going to get a job here, he was going to work here. That was like his dream, his thing. And, you know, I was 2 years younger than him. He was graduating senior and I was a sophomore at the time, and didn't really know anything what I was going to do. You know, I knew my major as a special education teacher, but didn't really have a plan after that. You know, truthfully, I was like, I'll go wherever I can get a coaching job. That was kind of my dream job. And I remember my senior year, Nate called me and was like, "Hey, I have an apartment out here. I can try to get you an interview out here. Why don't you come out for a weekend?" So went out for a weekend. I interviewed at Oswego East with Dr. Burton when he was over there. There wasn't even a position open. He was just kind of doing Nate a favor by giving me an interview. And then I interviewed at West Aurora, and those are the only 2 interviews that I ever went on.
Holy cow!
In my college life. Lucky enough to get the job at West Aurora as a special ed teacher, and halfway through my senior year, I have a job lined up. I have a place to live, and it's with one of my best friends. So everything worked out really well for me. Moved out here the day of graduation. We lived together for the first, I think, 3 years 3 years that I lived out here. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, it was a unique story. And I always joke around with Nate because when I was in college, we had the same major, special ed. And my advisor would always just, "Hey, do you know Nate?" "Yeah." "Just go ask him what classes you need." And that was her advice.
Nate became your advisor.
Yeah, that was her advice to me. It was just go ask Nate. And, I just kind of asked him, and I've been lucky enough. He was the best man at my wedding. I was the best man at his wedding. And, now he's back on the west side and kind of where he belongs. So it's been an easy transition, I would say. I never really had anything planned, and I just kind of went with what was working, and it seemed to really work out well for me.
What a great connection. Mm-hmm. What a great connection. That's an awesome story. It probably highlights how Aurora is a large place, but it's a really small place. Yeah. Think about the small world from Geneva, Ohio, out east to go to college, coming back to the Midwest, and reuniting with a teammate.
Yeah,
and still being teammates here. So
yeah, still teammates, still working with, still being a college athlete, I think there's that special bond.
Yes,
you're going through the same things every day. You're living it with each other, the wins, the losses, the workouts, and special group of guys, and that's something that obviously Nate being out here, but there's probably about 10 of us that get together every year, constantly communicating. Through phones and text messages and social media. So it's a good group that has been a good lifeline and a good support system for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's always that bond.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Go through those trenches together. That shared experience is super important.
Yeah.
And I would be remiss, selfishly speaking. I know you talked a little bit about being an Ohio State fan. The Big Ten. Come from a wrestling background myself, supporting Illinois and Iowa, but also in the wrestling world. I know at Edinburgh had a pretty high-profile athletic director.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
World champion and an Olympic medalist out there, and I know you guys get a chance to cross paths when you guys were competing in football with some of the wrestling program, and we always have some friendly barbs back and forth. So
yeah, that was one of the highlights. I actually got to wrestle the Olympic champion Bruce Baumgartner.
Yes.
It wasn't really by my choice. It was, every summertime we do some extra work for the wrestling program, make a few extra dollars here when we were up at school. And it was payday. He was having a wrestling camp. And to get our paycheck, he was like, "Come on out here on the wrestling mat, get your paycheck." Now, granted, he was about 6'3", 300 pounds at the time. And, myself was not that big, and he beat me up a little bit, had some fun with me. I took the 30 seconds of, kind of a butt kicking, and then took my paycheck and gladly left the wrestling mat. Yeah, that was all I needed. But that was a very cool experience. When I went to Edinburgh, he was the athletic director there. He was the head coach and then at the wrestling program, and then he became the athletic director. And I remember going in his office the first time. I don't remember what it was for, but just the memorabilia that he had. It was unbelievable. The gold medals, the famous people pictures on the wall, and small town Ohio. I've never saw that, and so it was a very cool experience to sit there and hey, look at that medal, hey, check that out, touch this, look at this, and just being able to experience that was a very cool thing. And as much as he was focused on wrestling, he was focusing on how did he make Edinburgh sports the best they could possibly be. So it was a unique experience to wrestle with him and get to interact with him. But he was a great ambassador for all sports. Yeah,
and I think it's a great comment you just made too, because I bring it up because of my connection, having run tournaments that he competed in and got to meet him. But he brings that unique experience that lifts everybody. Mm-hmm. So it's just that was just a unique thing that once I knew where you and Nate had gone to school, mm-hmm. that was a flick for me to be able to reach out and have commentary. But that's a great experience.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Experience I'll never forget. I'll say that.
That's cool. So fast forward a little bit, you talked about in your bachelor days and you're early on in your career, you and Nate were together, but then eventually you found that significant other, you and your wife, Carrie, who was also one of our teachers here in West Aurora. You have twin sons.
Yep.
And they are now, I remember when they were not in school, and now they're firmly established at Freeman Elementary, one of our elementary schools.
Yeah.
And and it's back when I said a lot of our graduates come back and want to be employees here. It's probably one of those proud moments as well when an employee chooses to bring their kids to be students in our district as well. It's a source of pride, but also, that's an earned piece of trust.
Yeah.
So I know in talking to some of our other employees that bring their kids here for a variety of reasons, can you share some of the discussion or some of the why you and Carrie chose to bring your boys here?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. The number one reason why, before Carrie and I got married, we took a trip back to Ohio to see where I grew up, kind of meet the family. And she walked in and kind of drove through Geneva, and you drive through Cleveland, and she kind of made the joke of like, what's this little town over here? And I'm like, well, that's Cleveland. And she's like, well, where are the buildings at? What, being so close to Chicago out here, she kind of made fun of Cleveland. And then we walked into, rolled into Geneva, and the last thing we said was we left Geneva that weekend. She was like, hey, if we are going to get married, I need to know something from you. And I'm like, well, what's that? And she's like, I need to know we're never coming back to Geneva. And she's half joking, was joking about it. But it was far away from her family. And, and I told her, I said, no problem. I'm established out here. You're established out here. Your family's out here. And the beauty part of my family is they'll go anywhere and move anywhere. So that was kind of one of her criterias of, hey, we can get married, but we're not coming back to Geneva. So I guess the next best thing was we lived together out by Waubonsie Valley High School.
Okay.
Lived there for a couple years in a townhouse. And we ended up, we're getting married, we're trying to start a family, and we just needed some more space, right? And we looked all over the place, and every time we looked at a house, I always had an issue, whether it was the neighbors are too close, the street's too busy. And we finally went out and looked on the far west side of Aurora, and there was, they were building new development there, and it was more spaced out, a little more land, and neighbors weren't right on top. There was common area behind you, and we got there and we looked around, and I was like, it's kind of too country out here. And she laughed and then yelled at me because she's like, that's what you wanted. You want to live kind of where you live back home,
sure,
but out here. And I was like, well, you're right. So we built, and we've loved it. We have a small little community. A lot of West Aurora teachers live in the community. All the kids, most of them go to the West Aurora schools. And the boys, like you said, I have first grade boys, twin boys, and Freeman Elementary has been unbelievable to them.
Awesome.
They have loved every second of it. And I'm talking the first day of kindergarten, I had to carry one of my sons onto the bus because he didn't want to go to school. He was nervous. He was scared. And, now he is every morning. What are we going? Where are we going to school? I want to go to school. Get me on that bus. They were in the same class together with Mrs. Hoke their first year. And I can't give her enough credit. She is unbelievable kindergarten teacher that they had made them love school. And that was my biggest fear as an educator, seeing kids who slowly kind of lose that love for school, and they love it. And now they're separated, and we were worried about that. They were separated classes, and they're loving every second of that now and have more friends. So I cannot be more happy with what we've chosen and what we've chosen for them. And, as the principal of Washington, that is one thing I do tell a lot of my parents when, they ask me, what about Freeman? What about Washington? My kids go there, and if it's not good enough for them, it shouldn't be good enough for your kids. And it's good enough for my kids. So I expect it to be good enough for your kids as well. So it's been unbelievable experience with Freeman. And the kids absolutely love it. And, they love the Friday nights and football games and basketball games. And, my wife taking them to the high school and just seeing everything that happens there. I mean, sometimes they love the band a little bit more than football, which breaks my heart. But they're in first grade. It's still early.
Well, a couple of things I want to highlight there. A little shout out from Ms. Hoke. Certainly, it's nice to hear that people appreciate your efforts, and I think that's carried over from kindergarten, even in the first grade.
Oh yeah,
her being supportive. The other piece of having had this experience with my own kids, it's a strong statement when people come in and they want to take their shots from left field about whatever their acts might be about the school, And when you can say, well, my own kids are here getting that experience that you're concerned with, that's a strong statement. And I think that sometimes shuts things down pretty quickly when people want to raise their hand and you say, as a testament, my family is in the same experience and we strongly support it.
Yeah. It's hard to look a parent in the eye and say, hey, this is really good for your kid, but it wasn't good enough for mine, so it's easy for me. I could sit across the table from them and say, hey, my kids they're going through the same thing yours are. They're going to experience the same things. And, I think the biggest piece, especially for Carrie and I, is the diversity that the district brings. Like I said, Geneva, Ohio, not very diverse, coming out here, the kids are going to get a real life experience. And I think that's just going to make them a better person. It's going to make them, stronger academically. It's going to just enhance their life even more to be around more diversity every day.
Certainly eliminates some surprises out there in life.
Definitely.
That's for sure. If I can ask you to reach back in your way back memory, as you were starting to grind out those initial years of your career as a special education teacher, was aspirations to where you are today on your mind? Was that in your, if you looked in your crystal ball and started thinking, here's where I want to be next and here's where I'm going to go there? Washington Middle School principal, and not just showing up, really taking it by storm. Where was that in your thought process?
To be honest with you, it never was in my thought process. I always, even all the way back to high school, I never really had a plan, right? And I always just kind of, I was going to go play football, so I had that plan. And then sophomore year of college, they're like, hey, you have to have a major. You got to figure out what you're doing. And I had two aunts who were educators, one a special education teacher, one an English teacher, both high school teachers. And they both sat me down and said, like, what are you doing? Go be a high school teacher. Go be a special ed teacher. You're a guy. You can work special ed. You'll get a job anywhere you want. And
Absolutely.
then you can go coach football. And the coaching football aspect was great. That sounds like a great idea. So that was kind of what drove me. And, those first 3 years of being able to coach and then moving into the dean's role and being able to coach, I was pretty set. I was going to be a football coach and, work at West High, be a teacher, be a dean. And that was kind of it for me. Luckily enough, unfortunate, I don't know whatever word to say, but there was a time that they said, admin couldn't coach anymore. We'll give you one more year, and then that was it. And that kind of forced me to then make a decision, and I can't regret that decision of moving forward to move over to Herget. I think working at Herget and learning from Cindy Larry is probably the best thing that's ever happened in my professional career.
Good.
And not just about the teaching and learning from her, but more about how to treat people, how to care for people, how to love on people, how to be their social worker, how to be everything.
You bet.
And not just the X's and O's. And without moving over there and, seeing how she interacts with people, how she lets her admin do their job and doesn't interfere, I would not be sitting in the seat I am today. So, thinking way back, no, never thought I would be the principal anywhere, and to add to that, I'm halfway through my doctoral program and never thought about ever, one day being considered, doctor of anything.
Sure.
That wasn't something that was, important at the time, I guess. And now as I've gotten older, I've started to realize a little bit more that being that lifelong learner is important, and watching my kids, see me like, Dad, what are you doing tonight? Oh, I have class tonight. Oh, okay, we're going to go do some homework then. They're seeing that too. And it's been a inspiring thing for me to see that they love school. And I guess I've grown to love school because that's something that hasn't always been there.
It's a good role model. It really is. That's, you've learned from role models. You talk about Cindy Larry and some of the other influences, setting that culture and that climate. And I think you've taken a page out of that book yourself. So good on you for doing that.
Definitely.
You mentioned some of your colleagues. Were there other influences along the way that gave you a nudge, gave you a little encouragement, a little, hey, you should take a look?
Yeah, I think I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of good administrators. I think being able to model a little bit after each of them, Dr. Hiscock at the high school, he kind of showed me the way as a young dean of, hey, here's how you handle yourself. Here's some different situations that you could be in, always supporting and always, giving guidance, but not ever solving the problem for you. So he was a very good one to start my career off with. Dr. Brett Burton, he was my AP of student discipline when I was a dean, and in learning from him, learning that the tough conversation, sometimes had to happen.
Absolutely.
And there's ways to have that tough conversation and come back from it. Like I said, Cindy Larry, a whole lot. I mean, I would say she's probably my biggest influence. And the other one is, I probably don't talk enough about, is Dr. Martino at the high school. Her and I actually I became a dean. She became the activities director on the same night. And that was the first night.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was the first night we ever met. We were sitting in the chair next to each other before the board meeting and kind of started talking a little bit. And, her and her husband, Mr. Pete Martino, have turned into lifelong friends of ours now. And that's kind of my connection to Iowa, where I go out to Iowa with them and watch football. But those four were probably the biggest influence for me. And then I've just been lucky enough to work with a lot of really good administrators. And, I think my team back at Washington has changed almost every year, but every year I've gained somebody who brings me a different insight, gives me a different way to look at things. And I would also say kind of challenges my thinking a little bit. And that's what, as the leader of Washington, that's one thing we asked during the interviews of what do you bring to Washington? And it doesn't, I don't want a yes man or a yes woman. I want someone who's going to come challenge some ideas and try to make some change. So I think working with, Jolene Smith and Markel and Victor and Regina and even Melissa Frankel, those have been people who have given me some different ideas and, have sometimes looked at me and said, hey, that's a dumb idea. And I'm okay with that, and that's what you need as the leader.
Absolutely. And I reflect on my own path. Teacher, coach, dean of students, AP, even, principalship leading to the superintendency. But you have a very similar hitting those rungs on the ladder type of a career trajectory. And you talked about some of those influences and people you've learned from and roles you've learned from. As you've stepped into your role of principal at Washington Middle School, were there some things that you kind of have encountered that really surprised you, even though you've gone through a lot of these other experiences, maybe that in hopes of preparing you, but were there some ahas like, whoa, I didn't see this one coming, and were kind of shocked or didn't have that background to address it?
Yeah, great question. That was, going through all the different positions that I've had, I went into the interview for the principal's job and I thought, I feel pretty good about this. And then stepping in that first day, I remember walking in the office and kind of sitting down and kind of looking around. And in my head, I was kind of like, holy crap, what do I do? And I think as much as all those other positions could prepare you as much as they could, and the leadership that I worked under before allowed me to kind of prepare, there was really nothing that prepared me to be the leader. It's something that I'm still learning every single day. It's something that I'm still, reflecting on.
Absolutely.
I'm still changing ideas that I have. It's something that I never realized. You're the social worker, you're the dean, you're the psychologist, you're the person to lend an ear to, and that's just for the staff. That's not even for the kids, and it's that human side of it that as much as we're trying to, get our students to move forward, we got to remember that our staff's there too, and we have to help move them forward and have to, prepare the best for them. I think the other thing is I took over the year that COVID happened, and there's no playbook for that.
Nope,
there was,
not even a little one.
How do we work through that? And, I joked with a lot of staff and families last year that, it was year 3 for me as the principal, but really it was pretty much year 1.
Yep.
Because I never saw a whole year the first year. We didn't really start the second year normally, and then the third year was kind of getting back in the swing of things. So, going into year 4 now is really back to hey, we have a somewhat normal school year.
It's incredible to think about that.
Yeah, it's been very interesting, and I think that's the biggest piece, right? You don't know how to handle that. You don't know the emotions that go with from the families, from the students, from the staff, the fears, the anxieties, and you're really trying to support everyone you can, along with supporting your own family at home. Trying to keep your own mental health, going during that time. And
tough balance.
That was a tough balance. That was the rough 2 years. So.
And just to piggyback on that, you talked about the nuances of coming out of COVID, working through COVID. But then on top of that, working with middle school kids, unique, different time of life. We used to, as a dean, those freshmen were always that unique student in the building compared to the rest of the soph, juniors, and seniors. Middle school students collectively just bring a different challenge. They have a unique perspective in their development. In your observations, experiences, what do you think are the biggest challenges that our middle school students face today?
You know, when I first started, someone asked, would you ever work at elementary or middle school? And my first response was absolutely not. I was a high school teacher. I wanted to work with young adults, not so much of the early teens. And now being part of it for the last 8 years, I don't know if there's another age group I would want to work with. The unique challenges that show up as sixth graders they still don't really know anything about middle school, and they've been in one class, one teacher pretty much their whole life, and now they show up and we have 8 passing periods, 8 different teachers, 2 different lockers. It's a lot of anxiety for them to show up and try to figure that out. And I think sometimes we forget that they've never done that. And we've, as middle school teachers, we've done it for many years, and, it's easy for us, but it's something they have to learn. And then you go all the way to the 8th graders who, they kind of start acting like freshmen of like, I don't really need you. I don't need this help. I know everything. But it's one of those experiences that when you see a 6th grader come in and then watch them evolve to 8th graders and a young adult and the choices they make, and it's almost inspirational when you see kids grow up. And then when you see them come back from high school, just how much they've changed, in those 3 years in middle school, how much they've changed from almost a little kid to, a young adult. And I think the biggest challenge for middle school kids right now is, social media.
Yeah.
Social media is one thing that it's a great tool if it's used right. And it's also something that could be very hurtful and hateful. And, that's something that we've been trying to do at Washington is trying to get kids to realize that, if you're going to use social media for good, great. Like, we're going to put TikToks out and Twitter videos and Facebook things out. And, we want them to be, positive messages. But we also know that there's a dark side of it, and trying to work through that with kids and, helping them understand why they do it, why somebody else would do it. I think that's the biggest challenge for middle school kids, is that social media. The other piece is just, they're so young and they're just not, they're not fully developed. They don't know, and some of them come and they talk about their stressors in life, and, some of them are very real stressors for them. And then other stressors that they have that, you kind of chuckle in the back of your head because you're like, you're 12 years old. Wait till you're 30 and it's some real life stressors, right? But we do have some kids who go through some rough things, and those are kids that, it's also inspiring to see how brave they are, how tough they are, how much grit they actually have, and we probably don't always give them enough credit for that.
I would agree.
How much middle school kids, that's that weird transition of, you can kind of take care of your little brother and sister, but you're not really old enough to take care of yourself. And, we need you to be part of the family, but you're still a kid, and, it's tough for them. So, I think just in general, middle school is a tough place. And, I think you got to really love it. And the teachers that work there have to really love it. And the admin that work there have to really love it. And, it's a different beast every day.
And I think that's a really unique insight that you bring. Not only you get a front row seat to see that development, but you also get a front row opportunity to influence that development. And so that's great that you come from that perspective of enjoying their growth, but also that you can influence that development as well. That's awesome. I would, speaking of that growth and development, I want to laser back in on Washington Middle School. I've made no secret about my desire to make public and continue that dialogue of elevating the conversation around public education. I've shared that as a public education entities, we're responsible for educating 90% of the nation's students, and second only to quality parenting, public education will have the largest impact on our future. So given those dynamics, as you look at the influence that you have at Washington Middle School on your students, what are you most proud of?
I'm very proud of the staff that we have. And I say the staff because they are willing to take some risks. They're really willing to have a tough conversation. They're willing to be uncomfortable a little bit. They're willing to give me feedback when they don't think things are going the way they like it or the way they should. And I think having a staff be able to do that has really opened my eyes and helped me reflect on kind of next steps for us. We spent a lot of time this year of just really building relationships with kids and trying to make it a safe and welcoming spot for kids to go to. And, but we always talk about the culture of learning. There's got to be a culture that kids feel safe and welcome there, but that culture has to be that at the end of the day, they are learning to move forward. And I think that's the hardest part, right? Where school used to be kind of the only place in town that you went to learn.
Yeah, it was the only game.
It was the only game, right? So you went to school, the teacher told you the information you needed, and you interacted with friends, and then you left. And now with social media, cell phones, they don't need that. They don't need a teacher to stand up there and tell them information anymore. And I always tell my staff, I don't need you to be Google. I don't need you just to regurgitate things that they can look up.
Sure.
I need you to be the library. I want you to help them see and research and find answers and really enjoy the learning aspect of school. So we always talk about that culture of learning where it's not just about kids loving to be there at school every day. We want them to love to be there, but we also want them to understand that they're there to learn. They're learning to move forward in school. They're learning to be, productive citizens. And so that it always goes back to the relationship piece. And I think my staff does a really good job of building relationships and getting kids to do things for them that, sometimes they wouldn't if they didn't have that relationship.
Spoken like a true leader. One last follow-up. You talked about your experience coming through the ranks, not really having in your career vision of being a principal. Be a dean, be a coach, life is good. Mm-hmm. How would you advise aspiring administrators, folks that are new? I've been a teacher 4 or 5 years. What's next on my horizon? How would you counsel them?
Maybe I'm a little old school, I don't know, but I think being a dean and being in that admin role as a dean, or very similar to being a dean, put you in a situation where you have to make decisions every single day.
Absolutely.
And you're going to learn that students aren't going to like those decisions, staff aren't going to like those decisions, and parents aren't going to like those decisions. And you really got to learn to live with that and kind of rely on what you really believe in and what you think is right. And I think that kind of moral compass helps develop, who you are as an admin and being that dean and learning and hearing about all the different situations that you're put in and having to make split-second decisions constantly just enhances what you could do as you kind of move up and in different roles. I don't know if I'd have started in any other admin role besides a dean just because of the situations it put me in. And I know some days there weren't the greatest days of being a dean and, some days are rough and you go home, you're like, oh man. But without those days, I don't think I would be the person or the leader I am today.
Couldn't agree more. Great endorsement.
Yeah.
Well, I want to extend once again our appreciation not only for your leadership at Washington Middle School, but for being here today. Appreciate the conversation. Mr. Tom Davidson, Principal of Washington Middle School, appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Please remember that you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, including iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and the TuneIn Radio app. I would encourage you to subscribe to our broadcast. Please give us your feedback so we can keep on getting better. Thanks.